Welcome back to the Rusty Pilot. Somebody asked in the comments the other day about buying experiences, and I was like, well, I can certainly cut a video on my process and how I look at things. So I'm going to look at a Cessna 172, and the goal here would be, would I buy the cheapest one on the market or the most expensive one on the market? And then I settled in at a $50,000 airplane and a $70,000 airplane that I probably wouldn't have to do anything to. Like I was looking for my son where we were going to time build, or if I was looking for myself and I was going to own the plane just by myself, no other owners in it, that was a comfortable price range for most people. So I went out to trade a plane and found a few, and let me pop that up. So the first one's a 1965 172. It's got about 6,000 hours on the airframe and about 1,700 hours on the engine. Obviously, it's going to have a steam gauge 6-pack on there. The other plane for roughly 170, it's got 2,000 hours on the airframe and almost no time on the engine. And that is since factory remanufacture is what that means by the 156 hours they've actually got on the engine. High time and low time airframes can be good and bad because basically you want to know how many hours is this plane moving in a year. And if you see something where it's set for 10 years someplace, the lower time airplane might not be as good as the higher time airplane. Let's talk about that. So the 6,000 hours since birth of the $50,000 airplane is 100 hours a year. That's actually pretty good. You want the airplane moving. That means that there's annuals going on and somebody's looking at it and moving it around. The more expensive airplane is only moved 41 hours a year. So that's something you need to be looking at because this plane hadn't moved a lot and has the potential to have sat for a while. Did somebody buy this thing as a barn find and redo it and stick it back out here on the market? Well, let's take a look and see. So the lesser expensive one has sold a lot, many times over the last several years. Don't know if that's from people building time and moving on, or there's problems in it and people are moving it. I know when I search for a car that if I've seen it move every year, there's probably something wrong with it that each owner's getting rid of. So no way to know. It wouldn't stop me from a pre-buy, but that is a red flag. So let's go back to the $170,000 airplane. It has moved only about 50 hours a year, but it's only had 4 owners over that period of time. And it looks like one guy has owned it a pretty good while from 06 to 2015. Then it sold to the new buyer in 2015 to 2024. So they had it for roughly 10 years. It could have sat for a while, and that could be why it's low time. And then they went up, and maybe they've redone some of the panel to get it where it's at. I'd have to look at the law books. Again, wouldn't stop me from a pre-buy, but it's stuff to note as you're looking at these airplanes. So let's look at the panels now that we're looking at the airframe and the engines. Typical 6-pack on the cheaper airplane. There is a 430 WAS in there, so at least you've got a modern GPS that is still supported for updates. They're not making any more. They're not making any more parts. That's probably something you're going to pull out and upgrade instead of fix. But he's flying it out of Addison, which is my home airport. So this is one of my neighbors. And he can get in and out there, which means you, for 50 grand, you can own a plane that you can go in and out of Class B and hand fly. So probably would make a good time builder in that sense. But let's get into the engines because that's where the real money's at. And that's where, you know, one of the 2 areas that big cost in these airplanes is going to come in. So if you're looking at this engine, you're going to redo that engine. I would tell you just to figure the higher end, that 40, and it's probably going to cost you $10,000 to put it in. If you look under engines and mods and props there, you'll see that engine overhaul was in 1976, 50-ish years ago. in that they have overhauled some cylinders along the way. There's just no way I would not plan as part of my figuring that I was going to have to pull that engine out within 1 day to 1 year of me buying this airplane, which is going to set you back in some time, which we'll cover in just a second. But let's switch over and look at the more expensive completed project. So here's the $170,000 airplane, and this is what you're getting for the extra $120,000 besides the engine that's completely overhauled. There is a 650 in there, there is a 430, there's a couple of G5s. The only thing that plane's really missing is an autopilot, and if I were buying one of these, I don't know that I would worry about it because it's going to cost you another 30 grand to stick one in. This would be a great little IFR platform to get around in with a lot of time on the engine. If I was time building with one of my kids in this thing, I wouldn't hold back for the engine or nothing. I would just fly it and then sell it after I put about 1,000 hours on it. Looking through the specifics here, the prop has been overhauled lately, so that's not going to cost you anything. And let's see, the frame time, total time on the airplane was 2,000, which I would want to look at, but not a deal killer, but it could have set for 10 years too. Cost on that engine that you're not going to have to absorb is, 40 plus 10, 50 grand. That's how I'm figuring that. So one more time, let's pop it all back up there. This is your project plane, and you're going to put a bunch of money in it. It's going to cost you some time, but it might be worth it. There might be a delta in the pricing here. It's traded hands a lot. I think that is a red flag that I'd have to really look at. Why are people selling it that quick? The flip side of it is, this one, it may have set, if I could rule out it setting and that it really moved 50 hours a year and was in a hangar, man, that's very appealing because it's probably in good working order. It's got a 180 horsepower engine versus 150. I don't want to really factor that in, but if you own a 172, it's going to factor in. So let's look at it. Total cost of plane, $50,000 versus $70,000. Overhauling the engine and getting it in the airplane is probably going to set you back $50,000. Overhauling that prop's probably going to set you back $25,000. To make those panels equal, I think you'd have $45,000, maybe even $50,000 in them. And then when you add all that up, you end up at about a $20,000 delta, but you probably add an 8-month difference. And that engine on this cheaper one is going to bring you down, and you probably are going to have that plane sitting on the ground for at least 5 months. It's been my experience so far. So there it is, looking at a $50,000 plane versus a fully finished project at about $170,000. I would buy the 170 and forgo the time. If you're going to do it piecemeal, maybe you're going to get in there on the $50,000 airplane, but it costs you time, and you have to figure time in because there's insurance, there's hangar fees, there's everything that fixed costs that's going while that plane's sitting.